Yeah, I'm going to talk today about Rarebase, which is a precision medicine company in the rare disease space. The company got started, I started with my co-founder, Omid Karkoudi, just over 2 years ago. I've been a tech entrepreneur for my entire life, and about 8 years ago got diagnosed with a rare genetic disease myself, causing tumors in my brain and spinal cord, which is the reason why, I felt like my mission is to really see what can I do, what did I learn from my life before this, can I apply this to the rare disease space. And yeah, Rarebase, as I'm going to talk about, is in precision medicine. So it's like the hardcore stuff, just trying to find treatments. Does this work? All right. So really, like with Rarebase, we are creating an opportunity for discovering potential therapies for rare diseases at large, and this is what I want to talk about. So rare diseases, as I found out when I was diagnosed, are actually not rare. Like they're very, very common. There are just a lot of them. So rare diseases is a long tail problem. In fact, like about 1 in 10 people have a rare disease. A lot of them are genetic, and most of the patients are actually children. So it's a really kind of awkward feeling to realize like there is a really problem like hiding in plain sight. It's the first thing you hear or feel if you're diagnosed is I'm the only one with this problem, or there are like so little people. But it is really it's really large. So as an entrepreneur in tech, like this is an inspiration to go after it. Like what can we do at scale? So the burden on rare disease also rapidly growing. Rare diseases are a relatively new phenomena. Like part of the reason is that we can sequence people, do genetic sequencing at a quite low cost these days. So we have been able to identify these problems much more precisely. So where you might, in like a few decades ago, were lumping in people with certain symptoms and having one disease, it turns out if you sequence them, you can associate a gene with the symptoms more precisely. So rare disease is like a growing problem, and the burden of it is huge. So the real problem here is that they don't often make the cut to be commercially interesting for the industry we rely on to solve them. And there are a couple of different consequences to that. Like we don't have a lot of therapies for them. In fact, only 5% have an approved therapy. But also, it's very unlikely that anyone really picks it up and finds a drug and starts a clinical trial. So it's really mostly up to the community and the patients and the parents involved to kickstart research. So what we are interested in with Rarebase is to create a solution to create efficiency and solve this problem at large instead of one by one in silos. Can we deploy technology to look at the space as a whole? And the key question, if you're diagnosed for families that are dealing with this, if you have a child that's diagnosed with a rare disease, this is kind of the burning question that you can't let go of. Like, what if there is a solution that is already out there? Like, we have a lot of drugs FDA approved. What if it's out there and we just don't know about it? And this is the problem with Rarebase, engaging with the families and the patients directly, that we are focused on answering this question for them. So our first patients, and we de-identified their name here, but let's call her Annie. It's our very first patient at Rarebase. Annie loves mangoes, piano, outdoors, water, and she loves daddy as well. So I'm going to use her as an example through the story and show you guys what we do for Annie. So Annie has a gene deletion in one of her 2 alleles. And the gene is called ZNF536. So all these genes have like names like this, very specific names. But the consequence of the mutation is that she only has half of that gene expressed. and consequently very likely only half of the protein that is created by that gene. So mom and dad have full expression and she only has half. So this is very precisely diagnosed. We know exactly what the problem is. So kind of zooming out again, what did we do at Rarebase to solve this? Like we have built, first of all, like an expert team, over 50 years of combined experience in the drug discovery space, but also engineering, like people from Google Cloud. So the real thing is you need a multidisciplinary team to solve this at scale. So you need people with the biology, the drug hunting experience, the science, and you need the computing and the cloud to work together really well in an integrated way. So we've built all three of that, and this is an essential part of the team and the infrastructure to create a solution like this. So if we go back to Annie, what we're really looking for, are there any therapeutics and small molecules out there that can turn the expression of that gene up? It seems very logical, like she has a mutation that results in only half of the protein. So are there any drugs out there that can work as a dial and turn it back up? So that's our goal for Annie. So the platform we built is basically capable of identifying these opportunities. So we have been generating a lot of data that's sitting in the cloud. So the data is generated in the wet lab and hosted in the cloud, analyzed by computational pipelines. And what we do is we basically turn all of the FDA-approved drugs into dials to turn the genes up and down. So if you get a small molecule drug, it changes the way your genome is expressed. So to give you a sense, you can see here like a graph, gene A, B, C, and D. We have about 20,000 genes, and we are measuring about 15,000 of them. There is a normal expression in a certain cell type on the left. And then when you add a drug, these expression levels change across the 15,000 genes. So what we've basically done in a certain cell type, we've mapped out how all the drugs do that to all these genes. So you can imagine it's a massive amount of data that we can now use to very precisely find drugs that dial the gene of interest up or down. So in Annie's case, we've actually found drugs that can potentially do that. So it's about 10 drugs, and the platform identified those drugs as potentially upregulating, turning up the gene of interest, which can, if it all works out, potentially address the root cause biology of the genetic disease. So small molecules are sometimes seen as they're just treating symptoms, but in our case, we are really looking for how they can address the root cause biology of the disorder. So the next step is to test those drugs further in the lab and ultimately, hopefully, translating them to the clinic. So our core goal is to create efficiencies. So how do we do that? Well, there are several items to this. Like we know precisely who the patients are. They come to us to help them with their case. So we can talk to them. We understand like their needs and what they're looking for. But also, like we know the gene. We know very precisely like what the problem is that we are trying to address. And by using FDA-approved drugs as a starting point, we also, as a society, know those drugs really well. Like trillions of dollars, 100 years have been invested in getting those drugs to market, and the application of them like helps us to understand how they behave quite well. So all these things together and building a platform where we generate that data at scale help to create efficiency and accelerate the path to potential treatments. So to date, like we have about 26 disorders on the platform that we are doing the validation work for. We actually have opportunities for hundreds of diseases more, even with the data we have generated so far. We have about 125 billion data points, and almost all of the rare neurological diseases we have identified potential candidates for to move forward. So a question that we get asked a lot, like how do you go from one person to helping potentially many, right? Because rare diseases require, by definition, a precision medicine approach. And what we're doing is make that precision medicine scalable. But another part of this is, like, once we have tested drugs in any case, the knowledge and the findings from that could, for example, lead to a clinical trial to help potentially all people with the same mutation. So we are working with individuals, but those individuals are the gateway to unlock treatments that can be applied in a much broader fashion. So as I mentioned, like we are not only interested in the neurospace, that's where we started, but we want to expand this to all genetic diseases. And to do that, we are adding different cell types to the platform, because the gene expression, as I mentioned before, is specific to the type of cell. So all the testing we have been doing is in neurons, which is, if the neuron cell type is relevant for the disease, the right model. But we need to kind of expand this further and add other cell types to cover the entire map. So the real goal is, like, there are about 4,000 diseases that are caused by a mutation in a single gene, is to cover the whole map and identify opportunities for applying already approved drugs quickly at scale to this group of people. So yeah, thank you. Like, I think we might have time for some questions, but yeah, if you are interested in learning more, please find me later. Yep. Go for it.
Really slick. So, question on the data or the drugs. Drug is indicated for one thing. What is that data set you're bringing in? Is it the mode of action of the drug on how it works, or is it for the indication of the drug that the FDA has approved it for?
Yeah. So the drug itself it's a small molecule. It doesn't really care what it's approved for, right? So that's kind of our consensus to make it easy for the doctor to apply them. So we are finding new applications for it, and by actually just looking at a genetic level, like for every gene, how does this particular drug regulate the gene? So it is important to understand, like, what the other effects are of the drug, like once you move them to the clinic. So part of the selection process is really, does the side effect profile, for example, match with the patient needs. So there's things we know about the drugs that we care about, like what else does it do that we might not want. But other than that, we are looking, like, very specifically what they do to the gene.
Hi, Onno. My name is Johnson. I'm the founder of Bloma, a digital platform that connects patients to clinical research sites that are conducting clinical trials to accelerate the clinical trials process. And I just want to ask a question about that first part of the flowchart of identify. We know who the patients are. How do you actually go about finding the people that have the rare diseases, making them aware of, either research opportunities that exist currently, or getting them involved in this process to identify potential therapeutics? How do you actually go about finding them?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. As we are scaling up, we want to make sure that people know about us, that we can actually do this. So far, everyone we are working with has found us through their own network. So typically, like, people in the rare disease space, they become quite active and connect to each other. So we build a name for ourselves in the rare disease space, but there are, like, I'm also acknowledging there are so many people out there that might need a service like this and don't know about it yet. So if any opportunity or ideas around that, like, are welcome.
We have a question over here.
Okay. Hi, I'm David Schwartz from Drip. You spent a good time detailing, all these rare diseases which have a genetic origin, right? Are you looking into helping spearhead, accelerate, CRISPR types of solutions for these, right? Like, ultimately, that's what we would like, not dial multiple genes, but just target the exact thing that's broken and fix it. So I wonder if you've you must be thinking about this. So,
Mm.
where is your platform trying to place itself on this path?
Yeah, I like the question because this is another issue, right? You're diagnosed, you're trying to see what you can do, and there's like this myriad of different roadmaps and path forward. What we are focused on right now initially is the fastest way to potentially get to the clinic, which is by using existing drugs. Is the most cost-effective and fastest way you can potentially have something. But in the future, I can imagine we can apply different types of therapeutic modalities and add it to it if the solution is not satisfying. But or if there is no solution that comes out of it, right? But even that information, like we can't find FDA-approved drugs for this disease that seem to have that effect. Even knowing that has a positive impact on the family's life, and because they can then focus on the next thing. But we're definitely interested, like in the long term, to like find other therapies, develop new therapies, other type of modalities as well. But the focus right now really is on what is the fastest and most cost-effective way forward. And I've actually, I haven't shared that, but I have repurposed 2 drugs now myself. And the current one I'm on has stabilized my tumor growth in the last 2 years. And the first time you experience that, because my tumors were growing fast, and now they are more or less stable with this drug. That is like a magical feeling, and it buys time to perhaps find the next thing if it's not satisfying.
That's wonderful. It's a great story. Thank you so much for joining us here, and continued success with the company. I know in the rare disease space it can be challenging, but you're doing phenomenal things, and thank you again for the support. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you too. Yeah,
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.